All right. Hello, friends. Welcome back to the show. My guest today on Evolving Earth is Michael Stone. Michael is the inventor of a new type of breathwork modality called Neurodynamic Breathwork. And he's the co-founder of the Train Your Brain, Master Your Life workshop. He's a certified holotropic breathwork facilitator and founder of Holotropic Breathwork LA and breathworkonline.com, where he is growing one of the largest psychedelic breathwork communities ever created. Michael was born and currently resides in LA, California, and spent the first decades of his life as a successful executive and businessman. In 2005, he discovered holotropic breathwork and became a certified holotropic breathwork facilitator in 2009. And thereafter, he founded Holotropic Breathwork LA to introduce in-person holotropic breathwork workshops to the Los Angeles area. And subsequently, he created Neurodynamic Breathwork, a new modality, which he currently facilitates online. And those neurodynamic breathwork sessions are some of the biggest, largest breathwork workshops ever done. Over the last few years, Michael has facilitated more than 150,000 breathwork sessions for more than 200,000 people from 20,000 people from over 110 countries. And he recently started training breathwork facilitators in neurodynamic breathwork, a training that I am currently in. Michael is one of the leading visionaries in psychedelic healing, and I'm honored and excited to have him with us today to share his perspective and wisdom. So Michael Stone, welcome to Evolving Earth.
Thank you, Will, and thank you for having me on the show.
Yeah, so maybe we could start with your story and how you came to breathwork. Like, how did you discover breathwork?
It's actually quite an interesting story because if you'd have known me when I was in my 20s, you would have thought that I'm one of the least likely people to be involved in anything like breathwork. And because I was originally trained in the sciences, I have a very kind of left brain scientific kind of mind. It's kind of like, okay, if you can't prove it to me, it doesn't exist. That was pretty much my perspective. And when I grew up, I had a pretty, I would say, normal childhood, nothing incredibly traumatic or whatever. And I was really wanted to have my life be the same way as my parents, at least unconsciously. It was kind of, they were my model. So I had in my mind already on an unconscious basis, I had my whole life planned out. It was like I was going to get married when I was in my early 30s, like my parents did. I was going to have 2 kids. I was going to work for a big company like my dad did. He was an engineer, and live happily ever after. That was kind of how it was, at least unconsciously in my head. I was totally unaware of that programming though. So I went to school, went into the sciences, of course, and went into engineering, then specialized in chemical engineering, and did very well in school, and then got an engineering job, did very well in that, got promoted, ended up on the East Coast, and met a woman when I was 31, 32 years old. And since I'd already decided in my unconscious mind that that was the time to get married, I married her. And if, for your listeners, if you ever have this kind of idea that you need to get married at a certain time and just marry the woman that happens to be in front of you, not a good idea. It generally does not work out. And in addition, I had a history of failed relationships, which I couldn't figure out what the heck was going on. I'm a smart guy. I can figure this out. You know, I get A's in school. I'm super successful in business. Why can't I figure out relationships? So of course, my mind was going, it has to be the woman's fault. I'm not meeting the right person. Right. If I just could meet the right person, everything would be okay. And at that time, I wasn't conscious enough to realize that there was only one common factor in all those relationships, and it was not the woman, it was me. So, you know, looking back on it, it was clearly my fault, and I'll explain that later. But at that point, it was all these women's fault that I couldn't have a relationship with. So 32 though, had another woman in front of me. Okay, let's get married. Well, that didn't last long. And once that broke up and I got divorced, it really blew up my whole plan for my life. Because I'd already had in my head, you have to get married at a certain time, you have to be a certain age when you have kids, otherwise you're too old, and your kids aren't going to be happy about it. And so it started to bring up this, this feeling of intense discomfort, because I still wasn't totally aware of this unconscious conditioning. I just knew I really felt uncomfortable in my life in a way that I'd never felt before. But I couldn't exactly pin my finger on it. So I ended up going to France, getting another job, still more failed relationships, still couldn't figure it out. But I started to bring all this stuff to consciousness because I started to look at what was really going on at that point. And so I started to re-examine my life. I said, okay, now it all started coming up. And I was going, okay, this whole thing with marriage, it's all blown up. I may never get married. I may never have kids. I started to see that. And then I started to look at, okay, what about my job? Am I really happy here? Is this really what I want? I mean, this is kind of the pathway my father took. Is this for me? I started to see maybe not. And ultimately, I ended up quitting that job and going back to California and starting my own business. And that was
Sounds
what
like
I really,
reality was crumbling in
yeah,
some
yeah.
sense for you.
Reality was crumbling and I had to recreate it from scratch, but more looking at what was true for me instead of what my unconscious conditioning was. So it started to bring all that stuff up because the whole kind of foundation of my life had cracked, so to speak. So I came back, started my own business, still couldn't have successful relationships though. So I got part of the way there, but anything having to do with my mind was working well. Anything that had to do with more of a heart connection, not working at all.
So
And
interesting. So you left the corporate world thinking like, okay, I need to be an entrepreneur. That's why I'm feeling this something is not being expressed. And then you went and were successful as an entrepreneur, but there was still something missing.
there was still something missing, exactly. And then one day, I met a woman and I felt very attracted to her, but she was still living with her ex-boyfriend. They'd broken up, but she was still living with him. And then one day she comes to me and said, Michael, I'd love to go down to Peru. I've got this friend who bought some land down there, and I just want to go down there and hang out for a week. You know, it's on the Amazon. So I'm going, sure, let's go. I'm going, okay, I get a chance to hang out with her for a week. Let's see if this is really workable or whatever. So we end up going down there. And on the way out, the lady who organized it said, would you guys like to have a shaman go out with you, a local shaman? So I'm figuring, sure, bring him along. There's this little guy, about 4'10", didn't speak any English. But so I asked, is there going to be a translator? Yeah, okay, let's go. So he comes out with us. First evening, he walks up to us with a translator and said, would you guys like to participate in a religious ceremony we do down here? So I never just say yes to stuff like that. That's like not a question you just say yes to. So I said, what is it? So he says, oh, it's very simple. It's all through a translator. I just go out into the rainforest. I grab these leaves and these vines. I bring them back. I put them all in a pot. I boil them up and you drink it. And so my immediate reaction is, you have got to be kidding. I'm a chemical
Really, you were a
engineer.
no. Okay,
I was a definite 100%
hard
no.
no.
It's like in chemical engineering, you mix 0.52 grams of this and 0.62 grams of this. You don't put stuff in a witch's brew and drink it, especially when you're a 4-hour canoe ride away from any possible help if something goes wrong. And what if he gets the wrong leaves and the wrong vines? I'm going, this is crazy. So
Had you ever heard of ayahuasca before?
no, I'd never heard of it.
Okay, so you
I
were
had
just
no idea what it was or what he was doing. I just knew he wanted me to drink something that looked like the syrupy thing that I wasn't going to drink.
okay.
But before I could get a word out, the woman I'm with says, yeah, we should do this. This will be fun. So immediately I'm going, oh God. So I'm having this internal battle in my brain. Like the logical side is going, this is crazy. You should never do this. This is against everything that you've been brought up to believe in science and this and that. The other side is going, you took a whole week out of your life and spent all this money to get down here and kind of get to know this woman. If you wimp out, this whole thing's done. You've wasted your week. So there's this internal battle that goes on. I'm kind of like silent for about a minute and a half while this is like these two sides are battling in my head. It's like these two armies that are fighting. And finally, I just give in and just said, okay, if I die in the rainforest, at least I'm in a beautiful place. I'll just, whatever. So I said, okay, let's do it. So, as you just said, it turned out to be ayahuasca, which I'd never heard of before. And I had one of the most amazing experiences of my life. It just blew my mind completely. And from that point, it wasn't even about the woman anymore. It was about the journey I had with ayahuasca.
What was the
And
experience?
it was really, for the first time in my life, I felt like the universe was a safe place.
Mm.
It's like I'd always felt like I had to protect myself. And I didn't know why. It was just kind of like that was who I was. It's like I didn't trust anything. And it was the first time I really had this experience. The universe is a safe place. It's happening for me, not to me. And it just totally blew my mind. And it just created this feeling in my body and in my being that I'd never felt before. So, to make a long story short, a week later, I get back to the United States and I'm going, okay, I can't go down to Peru to have these experiences every week. And I'm not willing to put substances in my body on a regular basis. So if I can have that kind of an experience with a substance, the receptors must be there in my brain. So there has to be other ways of activating those receptors. So I just went on a journey basically to find other modalities or other things I could do to have those types of experiences. And that ultimately brought me to breath work. You know,
What were the stops? What were the stops on the way? What
oh, I
was
was
that
I was
journey?
looking at almost everything, like healings and all different kinds of things. Anything that had to do with oneness, or I was looking all these things up in the internet. I would try this,
Did
try
you
that,
Google
look at
like
this.
how to feel one with all
Yeah,
creation?
that kind of stuff. Yeah, feeling safe in the universe, modality, whatever,
Wow.
that kind of stuff. So and the internet wasn't like it was today that back then, so it wasn't as good in terms of finding
Mhm.
stuff. And this was a while back. So, but it ultimately brought me to breath work. So then I started saying, okay, what different types of breath work are there? So the first one I landed on, I'm going, okay, who's the founder? And so I found it and it says, how did you find breath work? How did you develop your modality? Oh, I downloaded it from the universe. I'm going, no, not him. It's got to be another kind of breath work, not for me. And finally, I landed on holotropic breath work with Dr. Stan Groff, and which really attracted me because he developed his modality from science. And he'd had many, many years of experiences with what they call expanded states of awareness with LSD psychotherapy, and had amazing results with people. In some cases where he'd had clients or patients for years and done talk therapy and just gotten stuck. And then with one or two um, controlled LSD experiences in therapy, he had amazing breakthroughs because these blocks that they'd had were kind of gone during the sessions, and they could open up more and access more, and he could communicate with them at a deeper level. They weren't so protective.
Yeah.
So then he spent the next period of time researching what traditional societies had done to access these states. He calls them non-ordinary states of consciousness. I call them expanded states of awareness. It's the same thing. And then he also studied modern consciousness theory. And what he found was that there were a couple common threads that went through all of these ancient societies. One had to do with sound, and the other had to do with breath. And so, for instance, with sound, when he looked at shamanic societies, in order for the shaman to put himself in this kind of expanded state of awareness or trance state where he could channel healing energy to his clients, they use rattling or drumming. And even in Buddhist meditation, they watch the breath. And in many other things that they use breath holds or various ways to work with the breath in order to access these states. So we started playing with what different sounds and what different types of breath you could use to create a structure for a one-day workshop that would allow you to drop as deeply as possible into these expanded states of awareness. And that's ultimately how holotropic breathwork was born, through his work. And he worked with groups of people at Esalen for many, many months and just tried this and tried that. What he found was that music was the ideal structure in terms of sound, and then even a specific trajectory of the music after he played with it and tried different things. And then he also found that with breath, that there was a certain way to start the breath, but then ultimately to turn the breath style over to the person or to the breather and kind of follow the rhythm that he wanted to follow or that his body wisdom wanted to follow. So he put all this together and put it into an all-day workshop, and that's holotropic breathwork. So I tried a holotropic breathwork workshop, blew my mind in the same way that it did the ayahuasca. It was actually a very similar experience, my first one.
Really?
Yeah.
So you, wow. So you had the similar experience, and then was it like, I found it?
Yes. I said, okay, I've found my natural way without putting anything in my body to access these states. And
And this was like a 3-hour holotropic breathwork, full 3-hour with live with sitters
yeah, so it was like a
experience.
10-hour workshop, 3-hour breathing. Yeah, the whole thing,
Yeah.
basically the whole all day experience. And so at that moment, I made a commitment to myself to go through their facilitation program and to learn how, so I could present it to people in LA, in my area, to allow them to have the same types of experiences. And the first major breakthrough that I had in holotropic breathwork after a series of sessions was I got to the bottom of why I couldn't have a relationship. And it came back to, it kind of connected to my original ayahuasca experience, but just really deepened it. And I went back to my childhood. And this is one of the kinds of experiences you can have where you see things that you forgot about your childhood, or experience things in a different way, frame them in a different way. And both of my parents were originally born in Germany. They're both Jewish. And so they had to escape the Nazis with their lives, or else they would have been thrown in concentration camps. And like, for instance, my mother's family had been in Germany for hundreds of years. My grandfather was a World War I hero. He got the Iron Cross, so he was like a national hero. One of my ancestors, when Napoleon was coming through from France and was burning down all the towns, paid Napoleon to go around their town, and because he was the richest guy in town, so he just said, "I'll give you all this money, just don't bother us." He said, "Okay." So he went around and burned the next town. So their family was really deeply ensconced in the society. And then, from one day to the next, basically, they had to run for their lives. So they didn't tell me that the world was an unsafe place, but in my child mind, that was the interpretation that I made. That, wow, they were in Germany for hundreds of years, and then, like, my mom's friends started throwing rocks at her when she went to school, and it's like everybody turned on her. And I'm going, if you can't trust your country, if you can't trust your friends, who can you trust? So I developed this kind of unconscious thinking pattern: the world is an unsafe place. And when you address the world from that perspective, you're never going to have a good relationship. It's not possible, because in all my relationships, I was being protective. I would never
Protecting
fully
yourself.
drop in. Yeah, I was, because I was coming from the unconscious conditioning. The world is an unsafe place, so this person's unsafe. So I can't really totally open up. And even though I wasn't conscious of that, I was doing. And so I was driving these women crazy because they wanted to have a real relationship. They wanted to be connected to me. I was just letting them get to a certain place and wouldn't let them go any further.
Mhm.
So they all ended in drama, but it wasn't their fault at all. It was totally me. I just wouldn't let them in. So I finally got it. That whole thing that I should have ideally gotten like 20 years before. Yes, I was creating these failed relationships that had nothing to do with the other people.
And you saw this in a breathwork session.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. When I went back to my childhood and saw where that conditioning had come from, everything kind of came together. And then from then, it was kind of like my own process. Once I actually saw that, I had to start working on shifting the way that I saw the world. It's not like a magic pill. Like, you get an insight, then you have to do the work. And slowly my relationship started to change as I felt more and more comfortable with letting women in. And it was a process, but now I've been in a 9-year relationship, which is about 4 times longer than I've ever had in my entire life. And it's amazing. And it's basically all came originally from that experience of seeing what my unconscious conditioning was, which allowed me then to process through it and work with it. If you don't know what it is, you can't work with it. It's just running you unconsciously under the covers, which is how it was for most of my life. So
Yeah.
that was my first real breakthrough with breath work. And that made me even more committed to being a facilitator, because I started to see, oh my God, if there's that unconscious conditioning, what else is down there that's holding me back in my life? So it just was incredibly exciting to me that I had this pathway to look at what's going on in my unconscious mind and then work with it to really move forward and manifest the life that I wanted, instead of the life that was being created through these unconscious conditionings.
Thank you for telling us that story. What a great story. And what about one question I have is about the track. You were on this track of kids by 30, and how did you get a new awareness about that track, or how does that occur to you now, that whole like former, like, the idea, I guess, of that? What was that?
That was another piece of unconscious conditioning that came up for me in breathwork, that I really very clearly saw at what point I made those conditions part of my life, and as I grew up, when my decisions were made. And once I saw that, I said, okay, you know what? That is what my parents' life was like. It may or may not be relevant to me. I need to really start everything from scratch and really see what is really true for me. Look at more as what is my true authentic self and what do I want from my life? And I started to see, you know what? If I never get married, I'm okay. If I never have kids, I'm okay too. We'll just see what happens. So it's really a question of, I had this one possibility that I was tracking towards in my life. And through breath work, I was able to open the field of possibilities to
Yeah.
whatever happens is totally fine. And I can totally be happy no matter what the pathway is. Just take it one day at a time and leave all possibilities open.
And the story was, if I'm not on this pathway, then I won't be happy. Is that what it
That,
was
that
for
was my
you?
original story. Yes. My
Yeah.
only
I can
pathway to
identify.
happiness is to, follow this.
Achieve this certain thing.
Exactly correct. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then what about Breathwork Online?
Yeah. That
How did
was,
that come to be? Because that's how I first became aware of your work, and it
yes.
was in a breathwork session, and yeah, I had my own incredible experiences, and now I am in the training for just because of the power of those experiences.
So one of my experiences much later in my breathwork career, so to speak, after I had done 6, 7, 8 years of leading in-person holotropic sessions in LA for thousands of people, was holotropic breathwork is amazing. So if anybody has an opportunity ever to have an in-person session, it's a mind-blowing modality. It's incredible. But my frustration with it was that there was only a very limited number of people that I, as like one person, could facilitate for. Each workshop, and I was doing them they were fairly large in regards to how many people participate in other parts of the country or the world. They're usually, 20, 25 people. Mine were up to 60, 70 people. But even so, it's a tremendous amount of work to put them on. And you have to get a venue, you have to get mats, you have to do this. There's a lot of admin work, medical forms. So there's only so much one person can do. And so I was seeing people have these amazing breakthroughs in their life. And again, my frustration was that I didn't feel like I was being able to influence enough people to really accomplish my goal, which is to influence enough people in breathwork so that it can really make a difference in world consciousness, so that it can really spread throughout the world and really make a huge difference in the way that people saw the world, in the way that they experienced the world, so that these changes that really, I believe, need to happen in the world could actually happen and create this momentum for change. So in one of my breathwork sessions, it became very clear to me that that was one of my, you could call it missions in life, one of my, everybody has their own talent, their own unique gift that they have to bring to the world based on your experiences, based on your failures, what you learned from your failures, based on your past. And most of people are kind of disconnected from that because they have this constant input from the outside world. You can't be happy unless you have a car. You can't be happy unless you have a big house. Like it's this pathway that the world wants to map out for you, especially in capitalist societies where if you stop buying stuff, the whole society falls apart.
Mhm.
If everybody just said, I'm happy, the society couldn't go on because people wouldn't want to buy new things.
Mhm.
They wouldn't need a replacement TV every year or a replacement this, they'd be fine. And so the society has a stake in having you be unhappy, but telling you you're unhappy now, but you'll be happy if you buy this or if you do this. So you're constantly battered with this advertising and commercialism that makes it very different or very difficult to really connect with what's going on inside and what your authentic self is. So everybody has something that only they can bring to the world. And that's one of the things that can happen in breath work where people get more in touch with that. And for me, I got in touch with one of my gifts, one of my talents based on my own experiences, was that I could allow people to feel safe in dropping into these expanded states of awareness in breath work. And that was one of the gifts that I had to bring to the world. So I saw in the same session, it was either one or two sessions, I can't remember, but that, okay, if I'm going to really do this, the only way to do it is online. It can't be done in person. It's just, it would take, I would have to clone myself 50 times to be able to reach the number of people that I need to reach. Because at that point I was looking at, okay, I need to reach 10 million, 50 million, 100 million people to really make the difference I want to make. It's very difficult to do 40 at a time. So
Yeah, it's a lot of workshops.
a lot of workshops, right? So I came out of that session and said, okay, the only way to really do this is to switch it to an online modality. So immediately, anytime you take this leap of doing something new, there's this kind of mechanism of mind, this kind of inner judge telling you reasons why you can't do it. And I'm no different than anybody else. I got this insight, but all of a sudden this mechanism of mind, this inner critic starts to go, it's like, you're 65 years old. You can't start an online business. That's for 20-year-olds. What are you thinking?
Mm.
You know, I didn't even get a smartphone till a couple years ago. You know, social media, I wasn't interested in social media. It's like, I would look at it and I would go, people were going, oh, I had this for breakfast. Here's the, who cares? I don't care what you had for breakfast yesterday. So I wasn't really naturally drawn to that because I didn't grow up with it.
Yep.
So of course I've had this thing going, okay, you know, you're not into social media. You have no idea what you're doing. You know, I'd done a lot of in-person businesses, but online businesses are totally different. So I had that whole thing going on. And then also in holotropic breathwork, based on the way that Stan set it up, you can't do it online. You know, it's specifically designed as an in-person thing. So
Yeah.
I had this other thing going, will it work online? So I don't know. It's like, can people still feel the group energy? I don't know. So I had all these things going on about, well, why it can't work, why I shouldn't do it. Or, you know, because anytime you start something new, you're going to get this inner critic going, no, you can't do this. You shouldn't do this. You're going to fail kind of thing.
Resistance.
Right. But I was committed because I'd already had this experience in breath work that this is what I had to do. And this was like going to be a critical part of my life going forward. So I just allowed all those little thought patterns to, you know, back in the day, 20 years ago, that would have stopped me right there. Because I'm going, I'm not going to fail. I'm not going to take the risk. But, you know, through my breathwork experiences, I was beyond being in that place. And I just know that that's a mechanism of mind. It doesn't mean anything. Because you have a certain part of your mind that wants to be safe, that doesn't want to fail, that doesn't want to look bad. But it's just a mechanism. So I just said, okay, thank you for sharing to my mind, but I'm going to do it anyway. And so I just said, okay, I'm going to figure this out. And another interesting thing about the mind is that your mind can't tell the difference between a reality that you imagine in your head or what's really happening in the outside world. And, you know, part of what I'm a bit of a science geek, so I love neuroscience. So I've done a lot of self-study on that. And so if you give your mind a task and imagine it in your head as happening, it will start to search for pathways to get to that end zone.
Yeah.
So it hates dissonance. So it doesn't like things not being in accord. So once you kind of visualize this future and give it kind of the job of figuring out a way of getting from here to there, it's very obedient. If you tell your mind that you're unlovable, it'll collect evidence for you being unlovable. You have to be very careful about your self-talk. It's incredibly powerful. If you tell your mind that in 5 years, you'll have done breath work for 1 million people or 5 million or 10 million, it's going to be online, you visualize it, you visualize how it's going to feel in your body and the difference it's going to make, it will start figuring it out. And it did. So, you know, I went through a whole process of testing for many months with groups of people just to see what would work the best. And I kind of copied Stan Groff in that, where, you know, he had his group in Eslo and I had it online. So I had these groups of people that I work with to see what's the best length of music sets and of breathing sessions. You know, what's the best style of music to use online? What's the best way to support people in feeling the energy of the group and dropping as deeply as possible? What's the best way of allowing people to feel safe? And after I did all the testing and got the data, I launched it and it just worked incredibly well. And so I started a couple years ago and already I have 50,000 people in the community. Like you said, 110, I think it's 120 countries now. And it's just growing at an incredible pace because people have good experiences. So they tell their friends.
Yeah.
So it's just turned into this amazing, amazing community. And especially in COVID now, where people can't see their friends in person and many times can't see their family. People just love coming to these sessions and feeling this online community of people, other people who are also interested in manifesting the reality that they want and working with their unconscious blocks and moving forward in their life that they can really connect with on that level.
Yeah. Well, I'm super glad that you did, Michael, because that's how I found you and breathwork. Um, I think I got a free session. Is that something that you still do?
Yes, we offer a free session to anyone who wants to try it out. And you just have to go to the website, which is breathworkonline.com, very simple. And there'll be a little thing you just click on that says try a free breathwork session. And I could talk to people all day about what breathwork is like and what the experiences are, but things that are experiential, you really just have to try
You got to try
ultimately.
it out.
And that's the only way to see how it feels to you and whether you feel like it's something that you resonate with and whether whether you want to bring it into your life. So I just encourage everybody, not just for breath work, but if you're thinking about something, just try it. And then you'll see for real whether it's something you resonate with or not, and then tune into yourself and see if it works for you or not. So in breath work, I just really encourage everyone just to try out a session and see if it works for you. And we have many people that come in through that avenue, try it once, and then make it into something that really works for them in their life and really ultimately allows them to have breakthroughs in areas of relationship, in areas of their business, in areas of having insights into what their next step is in their life and working through childhood trauma. All those kind of things are available in breathwork.
Yeah. When I first was introduced to breathwork, I thought nothing's going to happen. That was I said, I'm going to lie down. Here's what happened in my brain. My brain said, I'm going to go in, I'm going to lie down, I'm going to breathe for an hour. Nothing's going to happen. And I'm going to have wasted an hour of my life. And what actually happened is I had a very surprising, call it expanded state of awareness experience or non-ordinary state of awareness experience. Um, got insights from about my business that had something that had been vexing me for months and months. And afterwards lay there thinking, what the hell just happened? That was incredible. And then I started doing more of it. And so for people who aren't familiar with breathwork, can you just give us a quick primer? If someone's
Sure.
listening to this and they're like, I've heard the word breathwork 50 times, but I have no idea what they're talking about. Can you fill in color that in a little bit?
Absolutely. And I totally understand that because I'm sure some people are thinking, I need to go to learn how to breathe. I know how to breathe. It's like, what is breath work? What does that even mean? And so essentially, breath work is changing the pattern of breath that you have in order to create physiological changes in your body and also some psychological changes to allow you to quiet the ego mind, this little chit chat mind in your head that's constantly talking to you so that you can connect to yourself on a deeper level, at the deeper parts of your psyche, to your unconscious mind, and have a direct connection and get experiences that are the experiences that you actually need to have to move forward in your life, but you would never be able to figure it out from your logical mind, because your logical mind only can work on a direct line from the past to the future. It's like the logical mind has a very difficult time creating breakthroughs. And it's almost never like that when people have major inventions. It's almost never like they figure it out. It's kind of like they get stuck at a certain point, and then one day they're just like laying in the bath or like taking a shower where their mind's quiet and just comes to them.
Yeah.
Because
That's a
the
great
logical
point,
mind,
actually.
it's kind of like there's this pathway. Okay, this is how it's been in the past, and it logically projects that into the future. But a breakthrough isn't like that. You have to go to a whole new level, and the logical mind can't get there. So that's why it's so important to be able to see things from a perspective that's not just the logical brain. The logical brain is amazing. It can resolve issues. It can move you forward on the same path. If you're making X amount, it can figure out how to make you 2X or 3X. But if you want to make 100,000X, it's not going to be able to figure it out because you have to make dramatic shifts in everything in order to get there. So anytime you want to make like a breakthrough experience, or you want to make an experience that, or create an experience which opens up completely new possibilities for yourself that you couldn't even imagine in this moment, you need to get beyond that, quiet the ego mind, and connect to this, what I call inner guiding intelligence, that will bring you the experience that you need in that moment to take the next step.
So just really practically though, it's lying down, or sitting up and breathing with music
Yeah,
and
exactly.
and breathing in
In
a
a very
certain way,
simple way.
right?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You just either lie down or sit up. You put on a headset or your earbuds. You just make sure you're in a safe space where no one's going to bother you for the next hour. You have a couple things beside you in case you need them, like water and tissues. And you close your eyes or put an eye mask on and just breathe. Do deep breathing a little faster than normal, and just to see whatever wants to happen, and just let it happen.
Yeah. It sounds implausible. I know if someone's listening who's never tried breath work, it sounds implausible, but I've tried it and it has been incredible for me. I think my second session, this was in person. Um, I just cried. I cried for 45 minutes, cried like a sobbing baby.
Mhm.
And it felt so good. I was working super hard at my business at that point in my life. And it just felt like all this stress and sadness was released from my body. I stood up feeling like $1,000,000. And then as I've been doing more and more of this, the experience has been deepening and changing. And I feel like I've now befriended this modality in a way, but we're not good friends yet. And as we're doing the training, I'm becoming better friends with the modality and with my own inner guiding intelligence.
Right.
Um, and and surrendering is a big part of it, right?
Yes. Yeah, there's actually three factors that work together to create the breathwork experience. And the first one, and this was actually really important for me because I'm, again, like come from the sciences, doing the deeper breathing creates certain physiological changes in your body that actually support what's happening. And it's actually theorized that what happens in your brain is in some ways similar to what happens in psychedelic sessions. Which, I mean, oh yeah, so no wonder I had something of a similar experience to ayahuasca, or went to some of the same places. That makes sense now.
And is that turning off the default mode network?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So basically, you're when you're doing deeper breathing, your CO2 level goes down, so your body's recreating the CO2 to bring it back to equilibrium, which makes your blood more alkaline. Which, when it gets to your brain, certain areas of your brain are getting more oxygen and blood flow, certain areas a little less. And one of the areas that's getting a little less is the default mode network. So you reduce activity, and that's been shown. They did some studies with holotropic breathwork where they did actually fMRIs, where it showed that there was less activity in the default mode network during holotropic breathwork.
And is that the same as running a marathon, Michael? Like if you exercise and breathe and breathe and breathe and breathe, does that also get you out of the default mode network? Because I feel that when I'm doing intense exercise, I don't feel in that same normal consciousness.
It's interesting because when you run, you are breathing more deeply, and you do tend to, especially when you really push it, start to breathe in and out through the mouth, which is also how you're starting the breathing in the breath work. And so the breathing is somewhat similar. So yes, I believe that has an impact on why people, when they say, oh, I got runner's high,
Yeah, right.
where they get this kind of feeling of kind of this ecstatic feeling while they're running, when they push it to a certain point. And so, yes, I do believe that does impact the experience that people have when they do long distance running and really push themselves, because the breath technique is a bit similar.
Super cool. So the breathing changes the alkalinity of your blood, and then that helps to take the default mode network down a notch and turn on other areas of the brain up a notch. That
Yeah, because I mean, as an example, one of the jobs of the areas that are in the default mode network is to control some of the other parts of the brain. It's kind of like the orchestra. And one of the areas that it suppresses is some of the emotional centers. So when the default mode network is suppressed, like these things that are suppressed, like maybe childhood memories and stuff, it can't suppress them as much because it has less activity. So those areas can be more active, which supports having these experiences from things that you've kind of suppressed from childhood, because those areas have more freedom to express and to come to the surface.
Yeah. Okay. And then the music, was that the other? You said there were three things.
Yeah, well, that's the first thing, the physiological.
Yep.
The second thing, which can be just as powerful, is one of the instructions before you go into the breath work is to completely surrender to the process, which we talked for a moment before. And for some people, that's actually the hardest part.
I think that's the hardest part for me.
Yeah, because in our life, we never completely surrender to life. And we're always, to a certain degree, we've got this mind chatter about, I don't want to fail. I don't want to look bad. All this stuff about where you don't fully express yourself. Oh, if I'm angry, people won't like me, so I can't express my anger. So there's always this conditioning about what's okay and what's not okay to express. And so this is a totally different paradigm where we say, okay, just express everything. No suppression. Whatever it is, just let it flow through. So it takes a bit of a shift for people to say, okay, I'm willing to go there. Even in Western medicine, it's basically a modality of suppression where, if you go into a doctor and you've got 15 minutes with the doctor and you tell them, oh, I'm depressed or I'm anxious, I feel terrible in my body. Okay, here's your prescription, take your antidepressant pill. They don't have time to do a breathwork session with you and sit with you for 2 or 3 hours. So it's not that it's necessarily a bad thing. It's the only thing possible to do within this structure of how we've set it up. And I'm not against Western medicine. It's amazing. Like, some people really do need medicine. It can really support certain things where it can make you functional again, where it can reduce symptoms that really do need to be reduced. But in the area of antidepressant and anti-anxiety medication, I think a third of the US population is on one or the other. And
Yes.
so, to a certain degree, our whole society is based on suppression on one level or another. And so this is really a mental shift to just let it all go. And the more practice you get with that and the more effective you are with that, the deeper your experience is, to just kind of just allow whatever wants to happen to happen. And so that's the second piece, which is, once you tell yourself, you tell your own psyche, this is safe, this is okay, I'm going to surrender, it's okay, I've got this. It's incredibly powerful because your psyche listens to you. When you tell it to suppress, it suppresses. When you tell it it's safe, just let whatever wants to happen, happen, it follows instructions. So that's an incredibly powerful thing. And sometimes people even drop into their breathwork experiences before they start doing the faster breathing. Even during the introductory session where we're just talking, once I tell them, and you just have to surrender to the process, things start coming up and they start to drop into the
They
process
don't
right
even
away.
need the breathing or the music. It's just
Yeah. Yeah.
the
I mean, it's
mission.
incredibly powerful. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the third piece is the music. And the music is specifically designed not to drive the experience, but to allow you to drop as deeply as possible into whatever experience the breath brings to you, your inner guiding intelligence brings to you. And when I say surrender, it's surrender and trust. Those are two really critical things. Surrender, trust, let go. But you're not surrendering to me as a facilitator, because this is an unguided experience. I don't go through, some breath works are guided all the way through, where the facilitator is talking to you and telling you, and now feel this and now feel that. This isn't like that. This is what I call a modality of radical self-empowerment, because it's about you connecting with your own inner guiding intelligence. And inner guiding intelligence has been called many different things over the ages. Like, Jung calls it the universal unconscious, or Sheldrake called it the morphogenetic field. But it's in essence this universal field of information that you do have access to if you can quiet the ego mind. And when I first heard about this, I was quite skeptical. I'm going, because this was 15 years ago. Like, this wasn't really in the kind of mass consciousness yet that was even really possible. And so I'm going, okay, well, we'll see about this. But I've seen so many breathwork sessions now where people have these experiences that are impossible to explain in any other way. I mean, just one example is there was this woman that she'd had a very difficult childhood, hadn't spoken to her mother in like 3 decades because she'd felt that she had a very abusive childhood emotionally from her mother. And in her breathwork session, she had an experience of actually being in her mother's body when her mother was a child, and actually seeing what was happening to her, and seeing that she was incredibly emotionally abused by her parents, especially by her grandmother. And the feelings, she felt the feelings that she felt when she was a child. And after she had that experience, her mother never talked to her at all about this kind of stuff. She said, "Oh my God, did that really happen?" And she hadn't talked to her mother in 3 decades. So she called her to see.
Mm.
And her mother said, pretty much, yeah. It wasn't 100% like that, but 90% like that. And it completely shifted her relationship with her mother because she had taken it as, my mother hates me. She's attacking me. To this is like this heritage that she had, this genetic thing that she'd been brought up. It was kind of her own conditioning of what happens between a mother and a child. So she got actually reconnected with her mother in a very beautiful way after that, and started talking to her again, and recreated their relationship in a very incredible way that wouldn't have been possible. So when you start to see those kinds of experiences, you start to say, okay, there's no other explanation, so this must exist. And now there's actually quantum science theories about how it actually works, but it didn't used to be back then. So
When I hear inner guiding intelligence, I think of soul.
yeah,
Like I believe that we each have a soul that maybe lives in our heart, and
yes,
the brain, the thinking intelligence can can work for the soul, but in our culture, the soul is suppressed and the brain is the logical mind is in charge.
yes,
So my
exactly.
experience has been like dropping into my heart continually over time and just peeling that open. And it's been
Yes,
great for me
yeah.
personally. Yeah.
And but it's important. It's like whatever your belief system is, whether you believe in God, you don't believe in God, you believe in a soul, you don't believe in your soul, you believe in science, you don't, like, there is actually a scientific explanation for it, and there is evidence for it. I mean, that's because, like, for me, that was necessary for me to actually dive in. I had to see the science. Some people are like that. Other people are like, yes, this is my soul I'm connecting with.
Right.
That's their belief system, and that works too. Or it can be, I'm connecting to source. Some people say,
Mhm.
whatever they see as source. Or I'm connecting to God as I see it, to this godlike energy that's in everybody. So ultimately, it doesn't matter what your belief system is. It works for everybody. That's one of the beautiful things. It's not belief based at all. It's just you just have to be willing to surrender and open up to whatever experience wants to come up,
Right.
from
So
this amazing inner guiding intelligence.
I love what you said, radical self-empowerment. And
Yeah.
so the radical self-empowerment is the breath, the the surrender and the trust and the music. And that's it, right? There's no other dogma, or there's no dogma actually.
No,
It's just
there's
the
no
oneness.
dogma at all, but the self-empowerment is more about, you start to train your psyche that the answers lie within, that you don't have to give your power away to other people to get the answers that you need in life. Just like, you got an insight about your work and how to move it forward. Normally you might think, oh, I have to go to a course in order to figure it out, or do
Right.
this or do that, and have someone tell me what the answer is. And you start to see that you don't need to do that. It's like you already know what your purpose in life is. You may be disconnected from it right now, but if you can, whether it's through breath work or whatever, kind of quiet this ego mind and get in touch with your authentic self, you can find it yourself. So it really turns your attention inside and surrendering to your own inner guiding intelligence. Not, sometimes surrender has this like bad vibe to it. It's like,
In
if
our
two armies are
culture, it does.
battling and you're
Yeah,
going, oh,
right.
I
Never
surrender, I give up.
surrender.
Yeah. Oh, it means kind of you lost. But in this
Right.
case, surrendering is winning, not losing, because
Right.
you're empowering yourself to find the solutions that are already inside. And as people start to do this breath work that I developed, this online neurodynamic breath work, we do it 4 to 5 times live every week. And part of the reason for that is that, just from my science background, it's clear that the They say the neurons that fire together wire together. That's a kind of a credo in neuroscience. So the more you connect to this inner guiding intelligence, the stronger the neural pathway is to get there. And so people that start to do this as a practice, like a yoga, so to speak, and where they'll do it once a week or they'll do it twice a week or whatever rhythm works for them, I get many, many emails afterwards saying, you know what, now that I'm doing this as a practice and I've done 20, 30, 40, 50 sessions or whatever, it's much easier for me in my everyday life just to close my eyes, quiet my mind, take a few breaths, and really connect to what intuitively I think is right and that I really know, rather than trying to figure things out. So people start to get more confidence in their own ability to figure things out, not just from their mind, but from their heart or from their soul, or however you look at it, from their inner being, and really knowing this is what's right for me. This is not what I'm just figuring out. Because ultimately there's always pluses and minuses, and many people get really stuck when they're trying to figure out what to do, because there's this on this side, this on that side, and they don't do anything.
Right.
They just get frozen in this kind of rational thinking mind going back and forth and back and forth. When if you can just tune into what's inside, you really know what the right answer is.
Yeah, that's one of the things I love about this training and about the whole ethos surrounding this breathwork modality is that in every case when we work with a healer or a coach or a teacher, we give away some of our power, or a doctor, I should say. The culture is about giving away some of our power to somebody who knows more, and then they give us some sort of answer. And there's none of that in neurodynamic breathwork.
Right.
It's rigorously about, as a facilitator, not giving somebody any answers and being honest with ourselves that we actually don't know what's right for anybody else, and that just with the breath, the trusting, and the music, that's all we can offer, and our presence, right?
Yes. And unfortunately, in our society, when people provide a service to us that has to do with some kind of personal growth or some type of whatever it is, it's to their benefit to have us keep going back to them, because we're going to keep paying them. That's how they make their living.
Mhm.
And so, it'll be, okay, here, okay, come back for another session, come back for another session, get a little further, come back for another session. And ultimately, your brain starts to create a neural pathway that I can't move forward without this person. And it's so that's really why it's in a sense, our society has an underlying principle of making us victims to authority in some sense, where there's always someone who knows more than we do, or who we have to go to get an answer. Whether it has to do with our health, whether it has to do with our relationships, go to a relationships counselor. If health, go here. If it's this, go there, go see the expert. When really we are the expert already. We just aren't in touch with that. And many people, even in neurodynamic breathwork, they report afterwards that many physical symptoms that they have, they actually get some relief from, just from doing breathwork. And in many cases, they've tried many different things and haven't gotten a result, whether it's like chronic pain of some sort. And just by surrendering to the process and allowing their body to do what it knows to do, they can get some relief. So it's really about, turning everything over to this inner guidance. And the more you can do that, like the more power you'll feel in your everyday life, the more confident you'll be in your own decisions and your own way to move forward, and the less you'll feel like a victim, in essence. It's very powerful when and you can also start to use the principles of breath work and bring them back into your life and create some same types of experiences. Because in the same way as in a psychedelic experience, you can have an amazing psychedelic experience, but then if you just go back into your life and go back to doing everything like you normally do, you're not going to get much benefit. It's just going to be this one-time thing, and then you go back to your regular patterns. It's kind of like that in breath work. You can have an insight, but then you have to do the work, and you have to make changes in your life based on that insight. So it's about bringing it back into your life. And just one example, and this is one thing that all of your listeners can bring into their life as a practice, a very simple thing where you can really, just from something very basic, can make a major shift in your relationships with people around you. And it's one of the primary principles of breath work. And that is that anything that happens in your internal emotional landscape is not caused by something that happens in the outside world. So in other words, the normal brain go-to mechanism is like if you're in a relationship and your girlfriend or boyfriend or husband or wife does something and you get upset, you made me angry. I mean, it's just like an automatic reaction. Or even the other way, let's say they do something, oh, you're making me so happy. It's just the natural reaction is attributing your internal emotional states to something that happens in the outside world. And that's part of our conditioning. It's part of our kind of victim-y conditioning. Because if your internal states are the results of what happens in the outside world, then you can never be powerful in your life because you give away your power completely. Because that means that anytime something shifts, you can't be happy anymore. Like if you can only be happy with this person, if this person leaves, you're done for the rest of your life. You know, because you've already made a decision that that person creates happiness in you. So the reality is when you think about it logically, everybody responds to things differently. If someone cuts in front of someone in traffic, one person will get super upset, the other person won't bother at all. So it's not about what happens, it's about the meaning that you create around what happened. So for instance, in a relationship, if someone gets you angry, the meaning might be you disrespected me. Like you're making some decision about what that means, what they did. It's never just about what they did. And that's what the emotional response is. So if you can shift that mechanism and just be more aware of it, and rather than projecting the cause of your internal emotional states onto the outside world, taking more responsibility for them, you can actually use them to learn about what your unconscious conditioning is, what your patterns are, what did it trigger inside of you, what meaning did you create around that, and when was the first time you experienced that? So you can actually turn it, instead of into a situation where you do damage to your relationship, you can actually turn it into a personal growth experience. And rather than treating the other person like the enemy, they're actually your teacher, your guru, your Buddha in that moment, because they're allowing you to do your inner work. And once you shift it like that, it can completely shift all your relationships in the world. And that's a breathwork principle, because anything that happens during the process, the instruction is make it part of the process. Work with the emotional state that comes out of what happened, not projecting the cause of it, onto something that happened in the breathwork room, or, let's say you're online and someone walks into the room and breaks up your session, who you didn't know was there. Your first instinct is saying, oh, you screwed up my session. I was in such a bliss, and rather than doing that, you just go, okay, I'm in the middle of something, and then just go back and work with the anger. Let the anger come up and let that process through. And it can trigger this amazing, insightful experience if you just take it inside. And that's part of what makes breathwork work. So if you can take that into the outside world and use that same principle, it can completely shift your relationship to the world and to other people. And that's true of all the breathwork principles. That's just one example.
Yeah, I love that. You taught this to us as the awareness positioning system idea. And I started using it with Katie, my wife, and immediate shift. Immediate shift. So I feel frustrated, angry, disrespected, whatever might come up. Instead of dealing with the content of the situation, what I learned is, okay, I'm feeling frustrated. That's frustration that's in me. Now what am I going to do about it? Feel it, interrogate it, see what's underneath it.
Exactly.
Incredibly powerful, especially for relationships in my case.
And just to give a credit where credit is due, that whole awareness positioning system concept was developed by Tav Sparks, who's recently passed away, but who was part of the couple that ran the Holotropic Breathwork facilitation program. Amazing guy.
Yeah.
And just an example of how that can work in breathwork and how powerful it is too. An example of an experience is there was a woman who was in an in-person breathwork session, and she was having her experience and going on this kind of very blissful road. And at a certain point, a guy next to her, who was also breathing about 5 feet away, started making these weird sounds, like, so immediately it's like it kind of jarred her out of the direction her process was going in. And her first reaction is, oh, why did I lay beside this idiot next to this crazy guy who's making these weird sounds? He totally screwed up my breathwork process. So that was, that's like the mechanism of mind, blaming things on the outside world. But then like maybe 20 seconds later, she pulled herself back and she said, okay, I'm going to follow the instructions and just take this inside. And we call it take it vertical and see what's happening. And so she will start feeling the anger, feeling the anger. And then she dove into this childhood experience where her younger brother, who was autistic, who was a couple years younger than her, used to make the same kinds of sounds. And so as a result, she was constantly taking care of her little brother, even when she was 7 years old, 8 years old. And so she dove into this childhood experience and really, for the first time in her life, was able to kind of grieve and mourn this lost childhood that she had. She was never able to be a kid because her parents were away working. She was always caretaker of her little brother and had this amazing process that completely shifted her life. And it was all about taking the experience internally and working with what was happening internally and not projecting it onto the outside world and making yourself a victim of, in this case, it would have been a victim of this guy. She actually used it for a personal growth experience.
Yeah,
So it works in breath work, it works in life, incredibly powerful.
incredibly powerful. It's a whole paradigm shift of, wow, I'm feeling something. It has nothing to do with the outside world. Okay, what does it have to do about me? What's the opportunity? What is this teaching me? I'm just scratching the surface of it, and it's already making big
Yeah.
changes.
And you can do that with movies. Like if movies bring up emotions, you can do it. There's this whole thing that Tav developed called movie yoga. You can do it with almost any experience in your life that brings up a strong emotion, whatever it is, whether it's a relationship, a movie, just driving around in traffic, whatever it is, you can always turn emotions into a personal growth experience.
Yeah.
And when you do that, it really changes because you don't feel angry anymore. It releases so much of these, like when you're angry, you put these incredibly horrible chemicals into your body that are just not good for your body at all. And if you keep getting angry and suppressing the anger, ultimately your body's immune system starts to break down. But when you have these experiences where an emotion comes up, rather than just allowing it to be, push it out there into the outside world, if you start to look and see what's happening, you don't stay angry. Like you can't stay angry when you're just exploring, so to speak. You like pull yourself and make yourself an observer of the anger instead of being the anger. And then once you start observing it, it switches into something else.
Yeah.
And it's more like, then you're just a learning experience, like you're in your kind of observational mind, just like in meditation, where you're taught to observe what's happening and just be present, be the witness, so to speak. So it's incredibly healthy and incredibly powerful.
And you recently started training facilitators.
Yes.
Why? What are you hoping to accomplish there?
Well, I listened to the outside world, first of all. And after I'd done neurodynamic breathwork for about a year and a half, I started getting requests for, we want to be able to do this for our friends too. And people started telling me, at first I said, okay, I'm not ready for that right now. I'm just doing the courses. But after enough people did it, I'm going, okay, I listened to my environment. And I'm going, okay, this is something, there's demand for it. People want to do it. And it kind of fit in with what my goal is, which is really, when you're talking about allowing 10 million or 50 million or 100 million people to experience breath work, I can't, even online, I can't do that by myself. So I wanted to have other people be able to also present this work to their friends, to their family, and, to allow them to have the experience of making a difference in the lives of the people around them. And so it's like I learned how to do it. So I wanted to basically take my 10 years of experience and the experience that I'd had with doing all these hundreds of online sessions. And, there's also a couple other people we work with, total of 40 years of breathwork experience, and to condense it into a 6-month training program so that other people can also gain the skill set. And there's also a personal development piece so they can start working with their own emotions to be able to present these types of experiences to other people in a way where they feel safe in releasing and having the experiences that people have with me.
Yeah, so you're going to have this army of online breathwork facilitators headed out into the world.
Yeah.
And is that how, I guess that's how you get to 50 or 100 million, right?
And you know, many people want to do it online. Some people want to do it in person. You
Yeah.
know, it's kind of like whatever. And some people, for instance, they just want to do breath work, or many people, let's say they're therapists and they want to bring breath work just as an adjunct to what they're already doing. Well, yeah, I want to do a therapy session by doing a breath work and then do therapy right afterwards. So it's kind of like people who, okay, let's do an LSD session, then we'll talk, kind of thing.
Mhm.
And they find that it increases the power of the therapy session, sometimes 10,000% if you can do a breathwork session first, because it opens people's hearts and takes away this whole thing about self-protection, where sometimes people in therapy kind of, it's almost a game with the therapist where they want to look good to the therapist and get praise. It's really not about really opening up to ultimately get the result that they really need and that they really came for.
Yeah.
So people do it as adjuncts to what they're doing. You know, some people just want to do neurodynamic breath work, either online or in person. So it's really up to each individual, but I really want to spread this knowledge and spread this capability to lead these sessions effectively to as many people as I can.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad you're doing it. Thank you for doing it. I'm learning a lot in this program and definitely recommend it to anybody who's interested.
And one of the amazing things is, like, when you do it, most of it's online and there's like 1 week at the end, but 90% of the program's online, is that you can work with people from all around the world. And, you know, we have people from Europe, from different countries, and from the US. So it's really amazing to have this international group of people that are learning to do neurodynamic breath work, all from different cultural backgrounds, and they all bring their own piece and other people learn from them too. So it's really, and the connection in the group, and I'm sure you could speak to this, is incredibly tight. And
Yeah.
everybody has this WhatsApp group. They're texting back and forth and messaging back and forth about their own experiences. And it's this incredible bond that gets developed as everybody is going through this personal growth experience together and learning how to, you know, present this work to the world.
Yeah, I actually think it's a great container in which to do breath work, just to have a community of folks that are all on, call it a self-development path, that are breathing together over a period of time. Like that's been a beautiful part of it, over and above the learning of how to facilitate and the inner guiding intelligence and the awareness positioning system. Whoops, and the awareness positioning system. So that's been a really beautiful part of it.
And one of the things that I wasn't sure would be available in online breathwork is whether people would feel the same sense of community as in the in-person breathwork. But it totally works. I mean, it's quite amazing. And you know, I occasionally do surveys and where I ask people, you know, do you feel it? And the majority of people do feel a very strong sense of connection to the group during their sessions. And when we start and doing the introductory talk, you know, I always kind of say, okay, and now just open yourself up, you know, to feeling the support of the group. And and some of them I say, just put your hands out and just really imagine this beautiful circle around the world and people putting their hands in yours. And afterwards, sometimes people say, I really felt someone's hand in mine. It was incredible. It was really happening. And they'll say, like, oh, during the session, sometimes I dropped into this very difficult place and I just went back and opened my heart to the support from the group, and it really helped me process through.
Yeah.
So it really does work online. It's in a very, very amazing way. And people can really feel, you know, when you're doing in-person breath work, it's like mostly it's people who are local, you know, because you have to, you know, there's maybe a couple people that'll fly in, but it's mostly people who are in your area. And when there's a big difference between having 20 people from LA or having 200 people from 20 different countries in terms of the feeling of oneness, and we're all the same. And, you know, why are we fighting each other? You know, people just get to this place of what's going on in the world.
Yeah.
This is crazy. We're all the same. We all want the same thing.
I was on a
Ultimately.
session, Michael, with 900 people that you led.
Yeah.
And that was a session where I decided I got to join the facilitator program, because there's 900 people from around the world that are all coming together, breathing together on the same path of self-discovery, healing. Beautiful, amazing. So
Yeah.
yeah, it is a
It's,
global, it gives it the potential to be global now.
yes, exactly. And you know, that really anybody can do it. You know, all you need is an internet connection and either a computer or even a smartphone, and a place to have some privacy for an hour, in essence. And it's extremely inexpensive. Everybody gets their first session for free, as we said, if you just go to the website, breathworkonline.com, and afterwards, if they just do it session by session, it's like $27. In-person breathwork is like 200 or 150, 250. Or we have a subscription program where you can get unlimited access every month, and we do like 18 sessions every month. You can do it for $4 or $5 a session. So it's affordable for everyone. It's convenient. You can just lay in your bed and breathe, and then you don't have to drive anywhere. You don't have to do anything. So it's really open to anybody who has a desire to really do this kind of inner journey and to really see what's happening underneath the covers. And, why are they not able to have the life of their dreams? What's really blocking them? Because many times we, on a conscious level, we have a desire for certain things. Well, let's say an amazing relationship or whatever it is. And, it's not happening. So like for me, it was just because I felt unsafe in the world. But sometimes people have these desires that are in their unconscious mind and these desires that are in their conscious mind, and they're conflicting. And it's kind of like having one foot on the accelerator and one foot on the brake.
Mm-hmm.
Like, for instance, you can say, oh, I want to be in this amazing relationship, but you have this also unconscious thing. I don't want to give up my freedom. If you don't want to give up your freedom and you don't get underneath and see what's happening and resolve that, you're never going to ultimately have a good relationship, because as soon as you go forward, there's going to be this unconscious pushback that'll sabotage it. So ultimately, if you have a place in your life where you feel like you're really wanting something and you're being held back, you don't know why it's not happening, breathwork is a perfect place to get some insight on what the blocks are and what's really keeping you from having, the life of your dreams that I think everybody has a birthright to. But you've got to do the work, basically.
Right. Not just the breath work, but the actual integration,
Yes.
preparation, session integration, preparation.
Yeah. Yeah. The breath work kind of opens the door, but you still got to walk through.
Right. What does this make possible on a global level? If you do get to your 50 or 100 million.
Well, it can completely shift everything that you see in the world. And you can see it by people who do regular breath work feel very, very different about their relationship to the world, to other people, to the planet, to everything. They start to feel more connected and start to see that there really isn't any difference between, me and someone in Russia, or me and someone in, where, many times you're at war with the country and then you're going, these are just people. What are we doing? So to me, first of all, there wouldn't be any more wars or that kind of thing. That just wouldn't be possible, because people wouldn't go for it. Even if the governments wanted to do it, the people would say, no, I'm not going.
Yeah.
And, figure it out, do it diplomatically, do it a different way. It's not about killing people. And the other thing is, people get really in touch with how dependent and interdependent we are on the planet and on other people. And it shifts their relationship to what they see about ecology, what they see about what really is important to them in their lives, and what they can do to support not only other people, but also the planet. And also it really creates an amazing shift about, and this is, again, I'm generalizing a bit because there's no, not everybody gets one experience or the other. And I'm just talking in kind of majorities of people that I see about what can I give to the world, not what can I take from the world. What is something that I can contribute? And getting joy out of contribution instead of just being just about me, so to speak. So getting joy from a different place of, how can I make the world better for everybody? What is my unique capability of contributing to the world? And the joy that you get from contribution is nothing like the joy you get from consumption. It's just comes from a completely different space. It's on just a completely different level. And people get more in touch with their desire to contribute and their ability and what it is that is their unique thing that they can contribute to the world in a very powerful way, and that only they can do.
Yeah. I love how you just said that. How do they feel different to you? The joy of consuming versus the joy of contributing.
The, when I talk about joy of consumption, like let's say buying a new house or getting a new car or whatever it is, it's incredibly ephemeral. it's like there, and then you're on to the next thing. It's like, okay, I've got this car, but then I want a bigger car. I want this. Like you never stay in that place for more than a few moments. And it's when you're in that place, it's you don't appreciate the journey. It's kind of like your all mind is always, I'm going to be happy when I get that car, when I get whatever it is. And instantaneously, when you get it, you're happy just for a moment, not for long. And then you're on to the next, okay, now I need you to get this. And then you go through this whole thing of struggling and being unhappy till you get to the next thing. So it's very kind of ephemeral. It only lasts for a short period of time. And then you're back in the kind of struggle of, okay, now I'm going to be unhappy till I get this next thing, then I'll be happy again. So it's this kind of wheel that you're on where you get these moments of joy, but then go back into the wheel, so to speak. You know, when you come from a place of contribution, you can always contribute every moment in your life. And, you know, even when you're in the checkout stand and you're just talking to someone, you know, if you can just give them a little compliment and say, you know what, you're doing an amazing job today. You can, every moment of your life, you can contribute in some way with everybody. And whether you're in a relationship, you know, just if you're in a relationship, just for a moment, oh, you know, you look awesome right now. You're so beautiful. It makes you start to cry when I think about it, sorry. But, you know, contribution is always open to you in every moment and can always bring you joy on a regular basis. It's very different because you can stay in that space, expanded space, so to speak, of joy and contribution. If you're conscious, the more you stay conscious, you can be in it all the time. Instead of being on this wheel of joy for a moment and then back to the struggle to get to the next joy. It's incredibly different.
This feels like a beautiful landing spot for us today. Michael, any last words or anything we didn't touch on that you'd like to say before we wrap it up?
No, I think that's pretty much it. I just really encourage everybody, you know, give breathwork a try. It's worked for me. It's worked for tens of thousands of people. There's definitely something there. So just check it out. And see if you resonate with it. You know, it's not for everybody. And in fact, there's some contraindications, certain, you know, physiological conditions that people have where you wouldn't want to do breath work. It's a very small percentage. So, and it may not be the pathway for everybody. And it's not something that you have to drop other things that you're doing in your life that are working to do. There's no dogma. It's not like, oh yeah, you're doing meditation, forget meditation, come do breath work. Meditation is an amazing adjunct. Doing them together can just blow yourself up in a very incredible way by adding both. So it's really about, there's no dogma. You don't have to give up anything else. Just give it a try, see if it works for you. That's, you know, that's like for everybody, and just, it'll resonate or it won't. But the only way you can tell is by giving it a try.
Giving it a try. And how can people find you again, Michael? What's the best place online?
Yes, so if you just go to the website, again, breathworkonline.com, and on the homepage is just a little button to push to try a free session. And we do 4 or 5 sessions every week, so you can choose one that works for you. They're different days, different times of the day. So there's something convenient for no matter where you live in the world. And just give it a try. They're like 2-hour sessions. And you just have to have 2 hours to yourself and a space, whether you can either sit or lay down, and a computer or an iPhone to connect. It's done through Zoom. And pretty much the whole world's on Zoom right now. So most people already
most
know how to use it.
Most people have heard of that.
Yeah, most people have heard of Zoom. And yeah, and that's all you need. So, and really just a curiosity. That's really it. Kind of a sense of adventure about life, to really see what's going on under the covers, see what's really driving you in various directions of your life. And it's ultimately about opening up new possibilities. I mean, if I had to just say one thing, as we get older in life, we close off possibilities. You know, we make decisions about things we can do and things we can't do based on our past. And so we never try those things again. And as we get older and older, it gets narrower and narrower in terms of what we believe we can do and what our pathway is. And that's actually one of the definitions of mental health that Dan Siegel has given. The wider your field of possibilities, the more mentally healthy you are. And this is just an amazing, amazing modalities for completely opening up your field of possibilities to things that you would have never even imagined were possible to you based on this mechanism of mind. Oh, I couldn't do it then, so I can't do it now. Or, oh, I can't make this kind of money. It's like, those are for people who are rich from childhood or this or that. All these stories you have about things you can't do, about possibilities that aren't open to you. And it just has the capability of opening up all those possibilities again, almost being in this childlike space of anything is possible.
Yeah, that's a great space to be in. I love that. Well, Michael, thank you so much for coming on the show. You're one of my teachers and mentors, so thank you for accepting the invitation and for giving us all your wisdom and just for the work you're doing and the difference that you're making in the world and spreading breath work. Just feel really happy that you are on this planet and that you're in my life and hopefully now in the lives of all of our listeners. So thank you.
And thank you. And thank you so much for having me on the program.